The series kicks off by introducing a young Chinese guy called Assam, who just arrived in San Francisco with other Chinese folks. As soon as they get to the port, they see Americans protesting against Chinese immigrants being in their country. It's not a warm welcome, that's for sure. Then this guy named Wang Chao tells Assam and the others to show their papers to the immigration officer. But man, that officer was plain rude. He even insulted and mistreated one of the immigrants who couldn't speak English. The poor guy tried to pick up his food, but the officer purposely dropped it on the floor. Assam wouldn't stand for that, so he stood up for his fellow immigrant and told him not to pick up the dirty food. That made the officer mad, and he slapped Assam. Surprise, surprise. Assam turns out to be fluent in English and warns the officer not to mess with him. Not only that, but he's also a skilled fighter, and he takes down the officers who try to challenge him. Impressed by Assam's fighting skills, Wang Chao takes him to meet Father Jun, the leader of the Hop Wai Tong, which is like a Chinese gang. Father Jun sees how good Assam is at handling those American immigration officers and decides to recruit him. But he makes it clear that Assam needs to show respect and always bow down to him, as he's the boss of the most powerful Tong in Chinatown, while Assam is just one of many poor Chinese citizens. Assam reluctantly bows to Father Jun, and later he talks to young Jun, Father Jun's son. Assam apologizes to young Jun for any disrespect, but young Jun doesn't mind because he's actually Father Jun's illegitimate son from a prostitute. Even so, he warns Assam not to stir up trouble because Father Jun is a tough and dangerous man. Then there's this police officer named Richard, who's on patrol. He catches two Irish guys who just killed two Chinese laborers in an alley. Those Irishmen even try to attack Richard, but luckily, he manages to defeat them and arrest them. The next day, the boss of the Chinese laborers, Merriweather, went to see the mayor and put pressure on him to handle the situation and protect his workers. So, the mayor told his deputy, Buckley, to form a special police squad for Chinatown, led by an experienced officer named Bill. At first, Bill didn't want to do it because he was promised a transfer by the police chief, Flanagan. But Buckley promoted Bill to sergeant, and he had no choice but to follow the mayor's orders. Meanwhile, there was this Irish guy named Leary at the trial of two Irish men accused of murder. The prosecution also called a witness, Richard, who saw the whole thing happen. The defendants were nervous because they didn't expect Richard to testify, but Leary signaled them to stay calm, saying he'll take care of it. Later that night, young Jun told Assam about Hop Wai's opium business and their rivals, Long Zi, but Assam wasn't too interested because he came to America to find his sister, Shaojing, who came here 2 years ago. Young Jun took Assam to a brothel run by a woman named Ah Toy, explaining that many immigrant women end up in brothels. Assam asked Ah Toy if she knew Shaojing, but she didn't, though she offered to introduce him to other women instead. On the other side, Leary was stirring up trouble, urging fellow Irish immigrants to get rid of the Chinese because he believed they were taking their jobs. Leary and the other Irishmen were mad that wealthy folks preferred to hire cheap Chinese labor instead of paying fair wages to Irish workers. At the same time, members of Long Zi's group showed up at the brothel, thinking young Jun was the one looking for Shaojing. But Assam stepped in and said he was the one they were after. He fought bravely against Long Zi's men, even when they attacked him with machetes and knives, and eventually defeated them. After the fight, Ah Toy praised his fighting skills, but Assam suspected that someone at the brothel betrayed him. Ah Toy denied it and revealed that a man had been looking for Shaojing a year ago, but was found dead. The next day, Bill chose 4 police officers, including Richard, to form the Chinatown Police Squad, as ordered by the mayor. But there was a tense moment when Richard, a former Confederate soldier, almost got into a fight with another officer named Stone, who didn't want to work with him. Luckily, Bill stepped in and told Stone to accept the decision since the mayor approved their appointment. On the other side, Assam is now officially part of Hop Wai and his job is to escort young Jun while he collects tribute from the Chinatown merchants. While on guard duty outside a shop, Assam noticed 2 guys from Long Zi's group passing by. He planned to confront them when they reached Long Zi's place, but young Jun stopped him, warning it was enemy territory. Shortly after, Bill took Richard to meet Wang Chao to buy weapons. But Richard soon figured out that Wang Chao was selling illegal weapons to the Tong factions in Chinatown. He asked Bill about it, but Bill didn't want to explain and just told him to keep quiet. Meanwhile, Leary managed to bail out the 2 Irish men charged with murder. They were thankful but worried about the officer who arrested them. Leary assured them not to worry, saying he would take care of the cop. Later that night, Leary bribed Bill to remove Richard from the trial. At the same time, he got challenged to a fight by a big guy. Leary accepted and told the man to wait behind the bar. The fight was tough, but Leary didn't give up and eventually won. On the other hand, Sam went to Long Zi's place to ask about Shaojing, his sister. But when he mentioned her name at a brothel earlier, Long Zi's men confronted him. Now at Long Zi's place, Sam faced Li Yong, Long Zi's enforcer, in a fight. Li Yong was skilled in martial arts and had Sam cornered. Just then, a woman intervened and stopped the fight. Sam recognized her as his sister, Shaojing, but she didn't seem happy to see him. She blamed him for the hardships she endured, having been forced to marry a warlord named Sun Yang to save Sam's life. Shaojing, now calling herself Mei Ling, told Sam that she fled to America because Sun Yang abused and mistreated her during their marriage. She insisted on staying in America and being known as Mei Ling, not Shaojing, and she got angry when Sam referred to her as Long Zi's prostitute, as she was actually his wife. Mei Ling, knowing that Sam joined Hop Wei, kicks him out of her house. Later, she meets Long Zi and assures him that everything's under control. Long Zi wants to reconcile with Hop Wei since his faction broke the agreement, and he asks Mei Ling to set up a meeting with Father Jun. On the other hand, Sam goes to the brothel and asks Wang Chao to send him back to China, feeling betrayed by being sold to Hop Wei. But Wang Chao explains that Sam is now part of Hop Wei and can't go back home. Toy finds out that Sam found his sister, and they share an intimate moment. Meanwhile, Mei Ling meets Buckley secretly and promises him that peace between the Tongs won't happen to achieve their goal. Later, Toy secretly kills 2 Irish men who got away with killing Chinese laborers. A few days later, Long Zi's group tries to smuggle opium, but Father Jun's team catches them and sends a warning. Mei Ling, having an affair with Li Yong, believes Sam will return to China soon. Li Yong advises her to prepare for a big battle, since Hop Wei is recruiting more members. Toy discovers that a prostitute named Lai Guan is spying for Long Zi, so she has her henchmen arrest Sam and injure Li Guan as a warning. Richard investigates the murders of the 2 Irish men and finds they were killed by a skilled swordsman. Bill meets Leary, who wants his money back since the case is closed, but Bill used the money for gambling. They get a tip about a body on the pier and head to the crime scene. In Chinatown, Young Jun and Sam are collecting tribute from a drug dealer when suddenly the mayor's wife, Penelope, shows up and scolds them for intimidating the dealer. She calls them cowards for bullying weaker people. After she leaves, Sam notices that she dropped her glove and picks it up. Later, Bill and Richard find a group of Long Zi members slaughtered at the docks. Li Yong arrives and takes the bodies to Long Zi's place. Bill says they don't need to investigate since it's a dispute between Chinese factions. Long Zi seemed to have expected Hop Wei's attack because his faction broke the agreement first. Mei Ling tries to provoke Long Zi for a counterattack, but he's more concerned about the government trying to expel the Chinese. Meanwhile, Penelope is attacked by 2 unemployed Irish men who are angry that she hired a Chinese assistant instead of Irish laborers. Sam arrives in time to save them and fights the Irish men. Richard comes to break up the fight, but Bill mistakenly hits Sam, thinking he's the aggressor. Penelope defends Sam, but Bill arrests him anyway. Wang Chao tells Father Jun about Sam's arrest, and Young Jun asks his father to release him, but Father Jun refuses because Sam is new to the group. He believes Sam's arrest might help ease tensions, as the 2 Irish men who killed Chinese laborers were found dead, causing anger among the Irish community. In prison, Sam faces harsh treatment due to racist views held by some Westerners. Richard, who is not racist, questions this treatment and Sam's arrest, as he sees him as innocent. Bill insists on charging Sam for the Irishman's murder, as he is part of Hop Wee, making him a convenient scapegoat. Meanwhile, Penelope went to her husband's office to tell him about the incident and asked the mayor to set Sam free. But just like Bill, the mayor also had a negative view of Chinese people and didn't take Penelope seriously, which made her upset, so she left. Penelope then visited Sam in prison to thank him for saving her. She promised to do whatever she could to get him out of jail as a way to repay the favor. Penelope told Sam that he was accused of murdering 2 Irish men, but she was surprised when he spoke fluent English and insisted he was innocent. Impressed with his language skills, Penelope suggested he defend himself since he didn't commit the crime. However, Sam seemed to lose hope because Hop Wee had left him in jail as if they abandoned him. On the other side, Wang Cheo told Toy about Sam's arrest and noticed her interest in him. But Toy denied it, saying she admired Sam's fighting skills and regretted Father Jun's decision to leave such a great fighter in prison. Wang Chao and Toy discussed how peace was unlikely in Chinatown, and they believed a war between the Tong factions was inevitable. Later that night, Li Yong and Wang Chao dealt with a corrupt policeman who caused the massacre of Li Yong's men by Hop Wee. Li Yong killed the policeman, and Wang Chao got rid of the body. The next day, Leary went to Mr. Mercer, Penelope's father, to talk about Mr. Mercer's cable car project approved by the mayor. Leary tried to pressure Mr. Mercer into hiring Irish laborers instead of cheaper Chinese workers. Mr. Mercer reluctantly agreed to hire Irish laborers on Leary's suggestion, but he wanted Leary to negotiate their wages for mutual benefit. In court, the judge refused to charge Sam with murder because there was no evidence or witnesses. Sam's lawyer, Coleman, argued that his client acted in self-defense against Seamus and Paul, who attacked him first. Hearing this, the judge decided to study the case further and adjourned Sam's trial. After the trial, Bill talked to Leary, who was unhappy that the judge postponed the trial. Leary wanted Sam immediately convicted of assault and murder. He urged Bill to take care of it, but unknown to them, Richard was secretly watching them from afar. On the other hand, Li Yong told Mei Ling that Sam was in custody for assaulting 2 Irish men. Mei Ling suspected that sooner or later, Sam would cause trouble and end up in jail. Meanwhile, Penelope asked Coleman to use her as a witness in Sam's defense. But Coleman said Buckley threatened to fire him if he presented Penelope as a witness for Sam. Later that night, on Leary's orders, Bill placed 3 Irish men in Sam's holding cell to kill him. But Sam easily defeated them and surprised Bill by speaking fluent English. Richard showed up and questioned Bill about his meeting with Leary, but Bill refused to explain and moved the prisoners to another cell. Richard asked Sam if he could speak English, but Sam pretended not to understand. Meanwhile, Li Yong and Mei Ling went to Seamus and Paul's house to threaten them not to testify in court. Fearing for their family's safety, Seamus and Paul agreed to follow Mei Ling's orders. The next day, Sam was acquitted of all charges because Seamus and Paul didn't show up, and there was no evidence against him. The white people were upset, but the mayor used it to gain public trust for his re-election. Worried that angry whites might attack Sam, Bill helped him find a secret exit. However, Wang Chao was waiting and told Sam that Mei Ling had arranged his release. Mei Ling advised him to leave San Francisco soon. Wang Chao asked about their relationship, but Sam remained silent. While Hop Wee celebrated Sam's freedom in a brothel, Leary scolded his men for failing to kill Sam. He eventually released them from prison and told Bill to catch the real killer of the 2 Irish men. Father Jun appeared and punished Sam for breaking the rules by getting involved with the white people. Afterward, Father Jun's toast signaled Sam's acceptance back into Hop Wee. Toy tended to Sam's wounds and asked about how the white men treated him in prison. Sam explained they looked down on Chinese people and treated them badly, considering them outsiders in their country. Shortly after, Jacob met Sam secretly and handed him an envelope filled with money on Penelope's request. Sam followed Jacob to the mayor's house and returned the money to Penelope. She apologized, thinking she offended Sam by offering money, but he said he didn't need it and left. Meanwhile, Mei Ling and Buckley plotted to instigate a fight between Hop Wei and Long Zi, despite Mei Ling's husband attempting to make peace with Hop Wei. In another encounter, Leary and his gang visited Seamus and Paul to question why they didn't testify at the trial. Seamus and Paul revealed that Chinese people threatened their families, so they didn't testify. This angered Leary, leading him to burn their house and force them to leave San Francisco. A few days later, Bill visited a gambling house and met his former colleague, Damon, who worked there for Feng Hai, the Tong that owned the establishment. Bill was surprised to hear this, but borrowed $50 from Damon since he was short on money. Despite Damon warning him to stop gambling, Bill ignored the advice and ended up losing all his money. Unable to pay his debt to Feng Hai, Damon beat him and gave him 3 weeks to pay. The next day, Young Jun shared Bolo's past with Sam. Bolo was once a railroad worker and an underground fighter, forced to fight as a slave in betting events organized by white people. Father Jun freed Bolo and made him his bodyguard to prevent the mistreatment of Chinese people. Bolo expressed a desire to fight Sam, but Sam was hesitant to face him. While Buckley provided the police chief, Flanagan, with an address for a raid, Mei Ling instructed Li Yong to recruit ruthless fighters who wouldn't hesitate to kill. However, Mei Ling was disappointed as none of the applicants could defeat Li Yong. As Sam kept an eye on Chinatown, he confided in Young Jun that he came to San Francisco to find someone, a woman who was now deceased. Young Jun assured him of his trustworthiness, but also questioned if Sam could trust him in return. Sam simply replied that he could be trusted. Later, Sam spotted Jacob in Chinatown, sent there by Penelope's request. Sam approached him and asked about the purpose of his visit. Jacob explained that Penelope wanted Sam to go somewhere with him, but he understood if Sam didn't want to cause any trouble. Meanwhile, Mei Ling sought Wang Chio's help to arrange a meeting with the leader of Feng Hai because she had something important to discuss. Wang Chio hesitated due to Feng Hai's reputation for cruelty, but Mei Ling offered a substantial payment for his assistance and stressed the urgency of the meeting. She hoped Wang Chio could set it up quickly. Afterward, Buckley headed to Toy's brothel to fetch the mayor, who was having a good time there. Meanwhile, the police arrived at the brothel as instructed by Flanagan, who had received orders from Buckley, and they began arresting Chinese men. One of the Chinese men tried to resist, but a policeman shot him and acted disrespectfully towards his body. Bill informed Toy that they had orders to shut down the brothel and arrest her. However, Toy bribed Bill to settle the matter, and Bill immediately accepted the bribe. Richard witnessed this and became upset with Bill. When confronted, Bill tried to divert the conversation by bringing up Richard's past and warned him not to meddle in his affairs, promising not to question Richard's history either. Meanwhile, Jacob brought Sam to meet Penelope at one of Mr. Mercer's houses in Chinatown. Penelope was increasingly interested in Sam, not only because he had saved her, but also because he spoke fluent English, making communication easier. Sam also felt attracted to Penelope, and they spent intimate time together in the house. Sam opened up to Penelope about his reason for coming to San Francisco, to find his sister. Penelope revealed that she had married the mayor to save her family from bankruptcy. On the other hand, Wang Chao successfully arranged a meeting between Feng Hai's leader, Pai, and Mei Ling. However, Mei Ling had anticipated that Pai would refuse to align with Long Zi, so she deliberately poisoned him. Following Pai's death, his second-in-command, Xing, took over Feng Hai's leadership and appeared willing to form an alliance with Mei Ling. After the meeting, Wang Chao expressed his frustration to Li Yong about killing Pai. Li Yong explained that Pai had refused negotiations from the start, so they had to eliminate him. Though Wang Chao wasn't bothered by Pai's death, he wished they had paid him more to dispose of the bodies. Li Yong emphasized the importance of Feng Hai in their plans. Soon after, the mayor and Buckley ordered newspaper reporters to create headlines portraying Chinese people as invaders, trying to take over the United States. Later that evening, Mei Ling picked up Sam just as he was leaving Penelope's place after a fun-filled day. Mei Ling handed Sam a boat ticket and told him to go back home. However, Sam tried to convince Mei Ling to come back with him to their hometown, Mei Ling explained that she wouldn't go back because in China she was nobody, but in the United States she held a respected position as Long Zi's wife. She warned Sam about the upcoming war between the Tong factions and made it clear that she wouldn't hesitate to harm him if he didn't side with her. Hearing this, Sam took the boat ticket and decided to leave. Meanwhile, Bill took Richard for a drink at the bar and gave him some advice about following orders from their superiors and the mayor. Afterward, Bill went to gamble using the bribe money he had received from Ah Toy. A few days later, Sam and Young Jun were given the task of transporting goods from Nevada to San Francisco using a horse-drawn carriage. During the journey, they had to share the carriage with a group of white people who looked down on them. One woman named Jenny openly made derogatory remarks about Chinese people, assuming they couldn't understand English. However, a pastor named Flynn intervened and delivered a brief lecture about respecting and loving all human beings, regardless of race or nationality, in accordance with Christian teachings. Flynn then asked Sam and Young Jun if they could speak English, but they remained silent. Young Jun complained about the task of transporting a coffin that he felt should have been given to coolies. Sam tried to comfort him by pointing out that at least they could leave Chinatown for a few days and explore new places. On the journey, the stagecoach driver informed them that the horses were tired, so they had to stop at a saloon and continue the journey the next morning. Hearing this, Jenny and the other passengers had no choice but to get off and enter the saloon. Sam and Young Jun, following Father Jun's instructions to guard the coffin, carried it into the saloon as well. Inside the saloon, they were warmly welcomed by Lu, a Chinese man who owned and worked as the chef there. Sam felt a connection with Lu because they were from the same region in China. Meanwhile, Young Jun revealed to Sam that he had never been to China since he was born in San Francisco. Lu shared his life story with Sam, explaining that he used to work as a coolie on a railroad construction project. He saved money and eventually left the job to start the saloon with his American wife, Kate. While Sam and Lu were chatting in the kitchen, Young Jun spent time with a prostitute named Wankia, who worked at the saloon. Young Jun admitted to Sam that he had developed feelings for Wankia because they both felt like outsiders and foreigners who were not welcomed anywhere. During their stay at the saloon, an altercation almost occurred between Young Jun and a passenger named Mason, who insulted him. However, before the situation escalated, a group of bandits led by Harlan suddenly appeared. Harlan shot Mason and his gang proceeded to rob the passengers at the saloon. It became evident that the stagecoach driver was involved in the plan as he accepted payment from Harlan, indicating a conspiracy. After Harlan ordered the stagecoach to leave, he demanded that Sam and Young Jun hand over the coffin they were carrying because he wanted it too. However, the two refused to obey his orders since they were assigned to take the coffin to San Francisco no matter what. Sam and Young Jun fought back against Harlan and his men, putting up a brave fight and managing to defeat them all. Kate, seeing the chaos, tried to shoot Harlan but missed. Harlan quickly realized he was outnumbered and made a hasty escape. Jenny scolded Sam and Young Jun for risking their lives in the fight. Kate defended them, stating that they were forced to defend themselves since Harlan's men were trying to kill them. However, Shepard, Jenny's husband, suggested that Sam and Young Jun were fighting not just to protect themselves, but also because of something hidden in the coffin. Lu encouraged Sam to open the coffin, and to their surprise, they'd found a bag of gold concealed inside the body. Sam asked Young Jun if he knew about the gold, but Young Jun claimed to have no knowledge of it. Kate warned them that Harlan would return for the gold as he might have known about it all along. Shepard suggested giving the gold to Harlan to save their lives, but Kate disagreed, knowing that Harlan is a ruthless and dangerous person. She revealed that she and Harlan grew up together, and she knows he wouldn't hesitate to kill them even after taking the gold. Flynn suggested fleeing to the desert, but Kate warned that Harlan and his gang knew the area well, making escape difficult. She proposed putting up a fight, especially since Sam and Young Jun were skilled fighters. However, Shepard insisted on handing over the gold to save their lives. To everyone's surprise, Sam objected in fluent English, revealing his language abilities to Flynn and the others. Sam made it clear that the gold didn't belong to them or Harlan, and he wouldn't give it up to anyone. Initially planning to leave, Sam and Young Jun changed their minds upon seeing that Lu and the others were at risk. They decided to stay and follow Kate's plan to fight back against Harlan's impending attack. Later that night, Sam disclosed to Young Jun that his grandfather was American, which explained his English proficiency. Meanwhile, Young Jun met Wankia, who was scared and considering running away. He offered her a piece of gold, and they shared a kiss before she left. At midnight, Harlan and his larger group returned to face Sam, who sat confidently on the coffin. Sam tried to negotiate, but Harlan insulted him and refused to talk. Without hesitation, Sam slit Harlan's throat, and chaos ensued as Harlan's men attacked him. But Sam found support from Lu and others, shooting at the enemies from above. During the intense gun battle, Jenny showed impressive shooting skills, but Shepard got injured in his arm. Sam was almost overwhelmed by Harlan's men, but Lu saved him in time. Young Jun also received help from Wankia, and together they fought off the bandits. With great teamwork, they defeated Harlan's gang. The next morning, Sam and Young Jun set out to San Francisco, grateful for the horse given by Lu and his wife. Jenny and the others decided to wait for the next horse carriage, while Wankia chose to stay with Lu and his wife. A few days later, Bill and Richard watched the Chinese New Year parade in Chinatown. Meanwhile, Li Yang received something from a masked man in secret. On the other hand, Wang Chao found himself guiding a group of curious white folks who wanted to get a good view of the parade. At the same time, Father Jun prepared to watch the parade from his spot with Bolo and some of his men by his side. The crowd was eager, and everyone was excited to see the parade passing through. But amidst the excitement, the masked man took advantage of the chaos to sneak up to Father Jun's seat and threw a dynamite right under it. Young Jun witnessed this and hurriedly warned Bolo to save his father. Just before he could act, a massive explosion rocked the area, causing severe injuries to Bill and others close to the blast. Tragically, a white female tourist lost her life, being too near the blast site. In the aftermath, Young Jun rushed to his unconscious father and urgently asked Bolo and the others to call a doctor for Father Jun's aid. Meanwhile, Sam was at Penelope's house, confessing about his past entanglement with the son of a general. Sam accidentally killed him, leading the general, Sun Yang, to seek revenge. Sun Yang seized Sam's family's land and farms. In the end, Sam's sister volunteered to marry Sun Yang to spare her brother's life. Sam shared his regrets with Penelope, wishing he had fought to protect his family instead of letting his sister sacrifice herself. Back at home, Bill was surprised by Damon's unexpected visit, who reminded him of the debt he owed. Damon warned Bill not to forget the debt, or there would be dire consequences. When Bill heard about the debt, he promised to pay it the next night at 10 p.m. in the bar as Damon requested. Meanwhile, Young Jun believed that the culprit behind the explosion was one of Feng Hei's men. To clear things up, he took Sam to talk to Wang Chao, who was present during the incident. The next day, Richard explained to Bill about the attempted murder in Chinatown, which injured several people and killed a white woman. Bill was surprised that Richard even knew about the territorial division between Hop Wei and Long Zi, and the possibility that Long Zi might be involved in the explosion to eliminate their business rival, Hop Wei. Richard also mentioned that the trail of the perpetrator led towards Feng Hai territory, indicating the involvement of the ruthless Feng Hai Tong faction. Richard tried to warn Bill about the disastrous consequences if Feng Hai got involved in the war between Tong factions, but Bill seemed uninterested, as he wanted Richard to do another job for him. He gave a gun to Richard and asked him to guard his house and protect his family while he met with Damon later that night. Richard was confused by the sudden request, but Bill didn't explain further and pleaded with him to do the job. In Chinatown, Young Jun tried to convince the Hop Wei officials to attack Feng Hai after learning that Long Zi had formed an alliance with them against Hop Wei. Some of the higher-ups hesitated due to Feng Hei's reputation for cruelty, but they reluctantly allowed Young Jun to take action since he was temporarily leading the Tong in his father's absence. Sam supported Young Jun's decision, seeing him as a brother. Meanwhile, the mayor and Buckley met with Senator Crestwood, who had concerns about recent incidents involving Chinese people in the city. Crestwood disliked Chinese immigrants, believing they would deplete the country's resources. He proudly mentioned his involvement in drafting the Exclusion Act to restrict Chinese immigration to the United States. Crestwood, who had ambitions of becoming president, asked the mayor and Buckley for their support in passing an anti-China law to stop Chinese migration into the country. After the meeting, Crestwood and Buckley seemed to have their own secret plans that didn't involve the mayor. Later that night, Yeonjun, Assam, and Bolo launched an attack on one of Feng He's casinos. Despite being outnumbered, they easily defeated Feng He's men because they were Hop Wee's strongest fighters. On another front, Bill sought Leary's help to deal with Damon and his debt. At first, Leary refused, but when he learned that Damon was working for the Chinese, he got angry and agreed to lend Bill the money to pay off the debt. Meanwhile, Long Zi's men were surprised by the body of Panther, one of Feng He's men killed by Yeonjun, left at their headquarters. Back at Bill's house, Richard guarded the front porch, and Bill's wife offered him a sandwich, asking about his presence. Richard explained that he was protecting the family from a violent criminal pursued by the police, covering for Bill. Finally, Damon arrived at the bar to collect the debt, but Leary challenged him to a fight. Leary was still upset by Damon's disregard for Irish pride while working for the Chinese to make money. Damon was sure he could beat Leary, so he accepted the challenge and threatened Bill not to escape once he was involved. They fought fiercely behind the bar, and Leary dominated Damon, cornering him multiple times. Eventually, Leary took Damon down and beat him up badly, while Damon couldn't fight back. Seeing this, Bill intervened, not wanting Damon to be killed. But Leary warned Bill that Damon would seek revenge and harm those dear to Bill unless Bill took action first. Although Bill was unsure at first, he knew Damon well and understood Leary's point. So, Bill went to Damon, who begged for mercy, claiming he wouldn't seek revenge. Still, following Leary's advice, Bill decided to settle the matter and beat Damon to death. The next day, Father Jun, having recovered from his injuries, met with Long Zi to discuss the Chinatown explosion. Father Jun learned that Long Zi had formed an alliance with Feng He and orchestrated the blast. Father Jun offered peace and continued truce if Long Zi broke ties with Feng He, but Long Zi sensed Father Jun's true intentions, realizing that peace wasn't on the table, as Father Jun had decided to kill him. After finding out that Father Jun and Hop Wei were out to kill them, Long Zi and his wife decided to hide in one of their farmhouses outside Chinatown. Meanwhile, Bill finally returned home, and Richard felt relieved to see him alive. Though Bill looked downcast, as if he had just experienced the worst night of his life. Richard didn't pry, and Bill appreciated his considerate silence. Bill went to his room, hoping to get a few hours of sleep before work, but the guilt and devastation over killing Damon weighed heavily on him, and he couldn't help but cry. Despite the pain, Bill knew he had to do it to protect his beloved family. In another scene, Ah Toy and some other brothel owners were choosing from the women who had recently arrived from China. Zan, the man who brought them to the United States, offered a virgin girl named Lai to Ah Toy, who showed interest because she hailed from Shandong province in Yunizhui. Ah Toy agreed to buy Lai from Zan before another pimp, also intrigued, got a chance to have her. Later, Mr. Mercer shared his frustration with Penelope, explaining that the mayor hadn't started their project yet. Mr. Mercer had invested everything, and if the mayor delayed any longer, he would face bankruptcy. Penelope offered to talk to the mayor, but her father suggested a more sensual approach to persuade her husband, angering Penelope, who left him. Meanwhile, at the bar, Bill runs into Gresham, a bounty hunter searching for Richard. To Bill's shock, Gresham reveals that Richard is a wanted fugitive, having killed 2 of his own relatives. Bill had no idea about Richard's dark past. Gresham offers to split the reward money with Bill if he helps catch Richard. On the other hand, Penelope sneaks off to her secret meeting place, preparing to spend the night with Assam. Just as Assam is about to head to meet her, Yeonjun informs him that Father Jun has ordered Bolo to kill Long Zi and his wife at their hideout. Assam, troubled by this news, goes to Ah Toy seeking information about Long Zi's safe house outside Chinatown. At first, Ah Toy hesitates to get involved in the Tong faction's conflict, but eventually agrees, considering the trust between them. With the information in hand, Ah Sam rushes to Long Zi's hideout, where Bolo has already taken down all of Long Zi's guards. Mei Ling, realizing the intrusion, confronts Bolo but is overpowered by his strength. Ah Sam arrives just in time and intervenes, asking Bolo to spare Mei Ling's life. However, Bolo reveals that Father Jun has tasked him with killing both Long Zi and Mei Ling. Ah Sam and Bolo engage in a fierce fight, showcasing their impressive fighting skills. Bolo had Ah Sam cornered, and it seemed like Ah Sam was about to lose the fight. But then, out of nowhere, Mei Ling appeared and swiftly killed Bolo by slitting his throat. Ah Sam was taken aback by the sudden turn of events. Mei Ling instructed him to leave immediately, as she intended to handle her husband, Long Zi. Meanwhile, Ah Toy was furious with Zan for selling the virgin girl from Yumingshui to a wealthy man named Holbrook, despite Ah Toy's clear instruction that the girl was not for sale. Their argument escalated, and Ah Toy eventually kicked Zan out of her place. At the same time, Bill confronted Richard at his house about the crimes Richard had committed back in Georgia. Richard confessed that he once had a secret relationship with a black woman named Nora, which led to a tragic event where Richard's cousins killed Nora. In retaliation, Richard killed his own cousins and had to flee to San Francisco. Bill believed that Richard had become a police officer as a way of atoning for the murders he committed. However, Richard denied it and firmly asserted that he deserved to be punished for his terrible deeds, with no regrets for killing his own relatives. Just then, Gresham showed up with some policemen to arrest Richard, thinking that Bill had framed him. But surprisingly, Bill defended Richard and ordered the policemen to beat up Gresham. Bill didn't see Richard as a heartless killer, and he warned Gresham to stay away from his partner, Richard. Richard thanked Bill for his help, but Bill explained that he was merely repaying Richard for protecting his family. Meanwhile, Ah Toy had a discussion with her business partner, and afterward, she discovered that Zan had allowed Holbrook to harass Lei. Ah Toy intervened just in time to save the girl. She retaliated by slashing Holbrook's face with a knife and cutting off Zan's finger, warning them not to harm the girl again. The next day, Father Jun was shocked by Bolo's death at the hands of their enemies. He ordered his men to prepare for a war against Long Zi. On the other side, Mei Ling delivered a speech at her husband's death ceremony, while Li Yang and Long Zi's men prepared for battle against Hop Wei. Young Jun expressed his surprise at Bolo's death, as he had immense respect for Bolo, considering him the toughest fighter. Ah Sam, however, couldn't say anything, knowing that it was him and Mei Ling who had killed Bolo. After Bolo's death, Father Jun instructed Young Jun to lead their strongest fighters in a fierce battle against the Long Zi faction led by Li Yang. The clash between these two powerful Tong factions in Chinatown was intense, and there was no avoiding bloodshed. Meanwhile, Penelope woke up and overheard her husband, Buckley, discussing the gang battle in Chinatown that resulted in at least 11 deaths and many injuries. Her thoughts immediately went to Ah Sam, wondering if he was involved in the fight. At the crime scene, Richard informed Bill that 7 of the dead were Long Zi members, while the other 4 were Hop Wei members. Soon after, Buckley arrived with Senator Crestwood and reporters seeking to cover the incident. Crestwood used the situation to push for the immediate expulsion of Chinese people from the United States, spreading negative views about them through the media to influence the government's actions and halt further Chinese immigration. Richard expressed his suspicions to Bill about the possible involvement of the Feng Hai faction in the battle, given their connection to the explosion at the Chinese New Year parade. However, Bill seemed disinterested in delving deeper into the matter. He was tired of working in Chinatown and hoped for a transfer to another area. Richard continued investigating and approached Wang Chao, but Wang Chao refused to reveal any information, warning Richard to stop his inquiries for his own safety. Shortly after, Wang Chao visited Hop Wei's headquarters and informed Father Jun that Lao Ting wanted to hold a meeting with both Father Jun and Mei Ling to discuss peace efforts. Young Jun, still upset about Long Zi's betrayal and attack on their territory, suggested rejecting the peace attempt. However, Father Jun believed they should find a smarter way to defeat Long Zi, considering that Mei Ling had allied with Feng Hai. He agreed to attend the meeting to observe Mei Ling firsthand, before making any decisions regarding their feud with Long Zi. Meanwhile, Bill met with Flanagan and pleaded to be transferred to another region, tired of dealing with all the problems in Chinatown. But Flanagan refused Bill's request, advising him to be patient until the anti-Chinese law is officially passed, leading to the eventual expulsion of Chinese people from the country if the law is enacted. Elsewhere, Leary encountered Irish laborers who were suffering from hunger and homelessness due to unemployment for weeks. He offered them some money to buy food and encouraged them to be patient in the face of their hardships. However, when a horse-drawn carriage carrying Chinese laborers passed by, the Irish workers became angry and threw stones at them, blaming the Chinese for taking their jobs. On the other side, Mr. Mercer had a meeting with the mayor, who gave him the green light for his cable car track project. Mr. Mercer was thrilled with the approval and was eager to start recruiting workers for the project. However, the mayor interrupted him, revealing that he planned to host a dinner for Senator Crestwood, who intended to run for president. He asked Mr. Mercer to organize the dinner, inviting the wealthiest people in the city. Meanwhile, Ah Toy faced a problem with her business partner, Patterson. They were trying to buy land and property in Spring Valley, but the owner found out about their partnership and demanded $5,000 to avoid canceling the deal and reporting them to the bank. Surprisingly, Ah Toy agreed to pay the money and urged Patterson to finalize the deal first. The next day, Father Jun attended a meeting called by Lao Ting, the chairman of the Chinatown Business Association, to address the conflict between Hop Wei and Long Zi. Mei Ling, accompanied by Li Yong, was also present at the meeting. Lao Ting expressed concern about how their feud would negatively impact business in Chinatown. Father Jun then explained to Lao Ting that Mei Ling had manipulated Long Zi and even sent members of the Feng Hai faction to attack them during the Chinese New Year parade. So, Father Jun was not willing to make peace unless Mei Ling stopped the war and followed the opium business agreement made between Long Zi and Hop Wei. But Mei Ling had her own reasons and deliberately caused gang battles in Chinatown to achieve her goals. Lao Ting, however, insisted on an immediate truce, fearing that the government's attention to the feud and recent incidents in Chinatown could harm the Chinese community in San Francisco. Lao Ting proposed a solution, suggesting that both factions choose their strongest fighters to duel. If Hop Wei's fighter won, Long Zi had to respect the opium business agreement for 5 years. On the other hand, if Long Zi's fighter won, Hop Wei had to provide Long Zi with a place for their opium business. Young Jun opposed the terms, arguing that Long Zi had broken the rules by attacking them first. There was almost a fight between Young Jun and Li Yong, but Wang Chao intervened and advised both factions to discuss the matter first. After a brief discussion with his son, Father Jun agreed to the duel, but he wanted Long Zi to accept the conditions set by Lao Ting as a neutral party. After discussing with Li Yong, Mei Ling agreed to Lao Ting's terms and accepted the duel. Meanwhile, Assam met Penelope at their secret spot, but she told him they couldn't continue their relationship as she was the mayor's wife, and Assam had a criminal past. Later that night, Bill had a run-in with 2 Feng Hai members who wanted him to pay off a debt. Annoyed, Bill ended up beating them up, but Richard arrived just in time to stop him. Richard learned that Bill owed money to Feng Hai and asked about it, but Bill refused to tell him anything. Meanwhile, Patterson met with the owner of Spring Valley, Timmons, and paid him the agreed $5,000. However, Timmons wanted to discuss something important, but their conversation was interrupted by Ah Toy. Ah Toy had killed Timmons' partner and didn't hesitate to kill Timmons in front of Patterson. This shocked and frightened Patterson, as he had no idea Ah Toy would resort to murder. But Ah Toy assured him it was done to protect Patterson and their business. On another note, Assam arrived at Hop Wei headquarters and was suddenly attacked by masked men. He easily defeated them, only to find out they were actually Hop Wei members following Father Jun's orders. Father Jun wanted Ah Sam to be the champion in a duel against Long Zi. Ah Sam agreed, and Young Jun then took him to Ah Toi's brothel for some fun. However, Ah Sam, still upset over Penelope ending their relationship, picked a fight with a racist man. Ah Toi intervened and warned Ah Sam about the dangerous Li Yong, known as an unbeatable fighter in Chinatown. During the dinner, Crestwood tried to rally support from the wealthy attendees to back the anti-China law and expel Chinese people from the country. But Merriweather argued that hiring Chinese laborers was more profitable due to lower wages. Mr. Mercer supported Crestwood, following the mayor's instructions. Penelope, however, interjected and criticized how white settlers took land from Native Americans and treated imported laborers poorly like slaves. Worried about her tarnishing his reputation, the mayor silenced Penelope with threats of expulsion. While Ah Sam drowned his sorrows in the brothel, Li Yong trained hard, preparing to represent Long Zi in the upcoming duel. Mei Ling secretly met Ah Sam, urging him to withdraw as Li Yong wouldn't hesitate to kill him. But Ah Sam refused, knowing Mei Ling was behind Long Zi's death and determined to defeat Li Yong. The next day, Leary informed the Irish laborers that Mr. Mercer would hire them for the upcoming cable car track project. The Irish laborers were thrilled to finally get the job they had been waiting for. Little did they know, Buckley was secretly watching them, plotting something of his own. Meanwhile, Ah Sam and Li Yong spent the next few days intensively training their martial arts to improve their fighting skills. On the other hand, Ah Toi was surprised to discover that Lei, the cleaner she hired, was skilled in sword wielding. 2 days later, fishermen found Timmons' body at sea and reported it to the police. Flanagan assigned Bill and Richard to investigate, suspecting that the same person who killed 2 Irish men before might be responsible. At the same time, Wang Chao seemed to have everything prepared, even decorating the place for the upcoming duel. He spread leaflets all over Chinatown, inviting people to watch the duel, and turned it into a betting event. On another front, Mr. Mercer and Leary started hiring Irish laborers for the cable car track project and paid their wages as agreed. Later that evening, Jacob told Penelope about the duel between Ah Sam and Li Yong in Chinatown. Bill and Richard were puzzled as the usually bustling Chinatown seemed eerily quiet. They noticed a Chinese man sneaking into a small alley and decided to follow him, which led them to the crowded duel site. Richard asked Bill if he had any knowledge about the duel, but Bill was just as clueless. When Bill and Richard arrived at the duel, Wang Chao approached them to explain that it was a prize fight for entertainment. Bill was skeptical because he noticed many Tong factions present, but Wang Chao assured them it was all in good spirits. Even Ah Toi and her servants came to watch. Wang Chao offered them a glass of beer and explained that the winner would claim the defeated opponent's sash as a trophy. Bill knew Ah Sam's skills well and bet $5 on his victory, confident he could win. The duel was intense as both Ah Sam and Li Yong showed off their impressive fighting abilities. Ah Sam managed to keep up with Li Yong, known as the most dangerous man in Chinatown, even cornering him at times. Li Yong almost gave up and left the arena. On the other hand, Bill was a bit worried, telling Richard that it would be trouble if all Chinese people fought like Ah Sam and Li Yong. Then he noticed Penelope in the crowd, looking anxious as Li Yong knocked Ah Sam down multiple times. Ah Sam struggled against Li Yong's attacks, but with encouragement from Young Jun and the Hopway members, Ah Sam managed to get back up and launch a fierce counterattack. He made Li Yong collapse, but Li Yong quickly recovered and counterattacked. Ah Sam fell again and seemed unable to fight back. Father Jun left the arena, thinking Ah Sam couldn't win. Li Yong almost broke Ah Sam's neck, and just as things were getting dire, Bill fired a shot to stop Li Yong. The gunshot caused panic, and Li Yong seized the opportunity to escape with Ah Sam's sash. Bill then found Penelope and escorted her out of Chinatown while keeping her presence a secret from the mayor. Penelope asked why he shot to save Ah Sam, but Bill explained it was to prevent further chaos. Meanwhile, Young Jun tried to convince Father Jun to help Ah Sam, but Father Jun believed Ah Sam was no longer useful to Hop Wee since he lost. Thankfully, Toy came to Sam's rescue and took him to her brothel for treatment. The next day, Buckley went to Mr. Mercer's steel mill and delivered some bad news. The city council had received a cheaper proposal from a new vendor for the later phases of the project. Mr. Mercer argued that they couldn't cancel his contract, but Buckley explained that his contract was only for the first phase, and they were open to other vendors for the rest of the project. Buckley revealed that the new vendor was using Chinese workers who accepted lower wages, just $27 per month, which made their proposal 15% cheaper than Mr. Mercer's. This news worried Mr. Mercer as he realized the competition from cheaper labor. Meanwhile, Sam had a faint vision of his sister, Mei Ling, by his side. It reminded him of their past, how Mei Ling defended him when he was in a fight as a teenager, and how she took care of him. In reality, it was Toy who was by his side, treating his injuries. As Toy treated Sam, he drifted off to sleep and had a dream about his master, Li Kang. In the dream, Li Kang gave him a jade necklace with healing powers and taught him the importance of proper breathing techniques for fighting. After practicing breathing techniques with Li Kang for a while, Sam made up his mind to train in martial arts at Li Kang's Kung Fu school. He promised to visit his sister, Mei Ling, every month and give her the jade necklace as a keepsake. In the present, Mei Ling attended a meeting with Longzi faction officials. One official, Zhang, refused to accept her as their new leader and accused her of manipulating Longzi. Without hesitation, Mei Ling killed Zhang right in front of the others, showing her strength and determination to lead. She boldly promised them a prosperous future if they supported her fully. On another day, Penelope visited Sam at Toy's place to check on his condition after the fight. She looked sad to see him battered and weak on his bed. A few days later, Sam tried to get up, but his leg, broken by Li Yong, made it difficult for him to stand. Toy helped him back to bed, urging him not to push himself until he fully recovered. Sam admitted that Li Yong was much better than him in fighting. Toy pointed out that Li Yong fought with a strong belief, but Sam lacked that conviction, which affected his ability to defeat Li Yong. Toy shared her own goal of standing up against anyone who oppressed the Chinese people and treated them poorly. She remembered how the Tong factions used to get along and respect each other before Mei Ling manipulated Longzi and created conflict among them. Mei Ling seemed to prefer chaos in Chinatown over peace. Toy also told Sam that Mei Ling had left him to die in that place, showing that she no longer considered him as her brother. So, Sam should stop worrying about Mei Ling. Shortly after, young Jun visited Sam and informed him that Father Jun decided to kick him out of Hop Wei. Sam wasn't surprised and didn't blame young Jun for failing to change his father's decision. Meanwhile, Bill and Richard questioned Wang Chao to find leads about the sword-wielding killer. Wang Chao explained that the sword was an old-fashioned weapon and not commonly used by Chinese people anymore. He assured them that no arms dealers in Chinatown sold such a sword. Nevertheless, Wang Chao promised to help in any way he could to solve the murder case. After parting ways, Richard was attacked by Feng Hai members, but managed to defeat them. However, Xing appeared and brutally beat Richard, warning Bill by throwing a mahjong tile. Later, Sam, still recovering, chose to work as a laborer at a Chinatown construction site. He lived in a rundown labor camp, sharing a bed with a man named Po, as they took turns using it based on their work shifts. Meanwhile, Richard remains in a coma after the attack by Xing and his gang a few days ago. Bill is devotedly staying by Richard's side at the hospital, refusing to leave even for a moment to be with his own children at home. He feels responsible for what happened to Richard, and since Richard has no family in the city, Bill wants to support him. Bill's wife understands his decision and visits the hospital every morning, praying for Richard and bringing breakfast for Bill. She asks Bill about the attackers, but he says the police are still investigating, although he knows it was the work of Feng Hai to send a warning. Following Lao Ting's terms, Father Jun grants an area in Chinatown to Mei Ling for Longzi's opium business. Mei Ling is hesitant about the location, but Father Jun reminds her that they broke the agreement first. He warns that if Long Zi encroaches on their territory again, he won't hesitate to take action, even against Mei Ling. Later that night, Leary scolds his men for insulting two black men, defending the black men while ordering his men to stay away from Irish bars. He then learns that Mr. Mercer fired the Irish workers and hired Chinese laborers. The next day, Leary went to Mr. Mercer's steel mill and found out that Mr. Mercer had hired Chinese workers, breaking their agreement. Leary demanded that Mr. Mercer fire the Chinese workers and rehire the Irish workers as they had agreed. Mr. Mercer explained that the city council pressured him to save money, leaving him no choice but to hire cheaper Irish workers. But Leary wouldn't listen to any explanation and threatened Mr. Mercer to stick to their deal. Meanwhile, after a tiring day at work, Assam returned to find Poe injured and running a fever due to infection. Despite being exhausted, Assam couldn't bear to see his friend suffering and let him rest in bed. Since Richard remained in a coma, Bill felt guilty for getting him into trouble and decided to seek revenge at Feng Hai's gambling house. He managed to defeat several Feng Hai members, but then Xing showed up and disarmed him. Xing knew about Bill's debt to Feng Hai, even though Damon was dead. He revealed that he was the one who beat Richard to warn Bill about paying his debt. Surprisingly, Xing didn't want money as payment. He had other plans in mind. On the other hand, Penelope, aware of Leary's threats to her father, approached Buckley because Leary forced her father to hire Chinese laborers. After realizing that Buckley was the reason Mr. Mercer faced trouble with Leary, Penelope demanded protection from Buckley. However, Buckley explained that city officials shouldn't be seen supporting businessmen like Mr. Mercer. Still, he promised to have a group of people watch over them from afar and be ready to help if needed. Shortly after, Buckley had a secret meeting with Mei Ling to talk about their opium business. He congratulated her on becoming the leader of Long Zi, but reminded her not to forget their original goal. Mei Ling assured Buckley that he shouldn't worry because the peace in Chinatown wouldn't last, and she had plans in motion for what comes next. The next day, Wang Chao approached Assam with news of a big project and advised him to prepare if he wanted the job. Meanwhile, Richard finally woke up from his coma in the hospital, where Bill had been looking after him. Bill filled Richard in on what happened while he was unconscious and how the police were chasing the attackers in Chinatown. The police carried out raids in different places, resulting in arrests from various Tong factions like Feng Hai, Long Zi, and Hop Wei. Mei Ling was puzzled as to why they were raided since they hadn't broken the law. Li Yang revealed that it was revenge for an attack on a police officer during patrol. On another note, Young Jun tried to convince Assam to rejoin Hop Wei, citing the alliance forming between Long Zi and Feng Hai. However, Assam couldn't forget how Father Jun had discarded him after his loyalty to the faction. Despite Young Jun's insistence on following Lao Ting's rules, Assam declined the offer and opted to take a job at a steel factory with Wang Chao. To his surprise, the factory turned out to be owned by Mr. Mercer, and there, he encountered Penelope helping her father manage the company's finances. Penelope approached Assam, concerned about his well-being after he left Toy's place secretly. She offered him a job as a manager in her company, considering his fluency in English, but Assam declined, choosing to work as a laborer instead. Meanwhile, Mei Ling discovered that the ones responsible for the attack on a police officer were Feng Hai members. She summoned Xing and his men to Long Zi's headquarters, demanding an explanation. Xing, however, insisted that it was Feng Hai's own business and not Long Zi's concern. He emphasized that Feng Hai would follow their own rules, not those set by Long Zi. Mei Ling realized that Xing wasn't the reliable partner she thought he was and considered ending their partnership. However, Xing had already anticipated this and took Long Zi's members hostage, threatening Mei Ling. He wanted to discuss the details of their agreement and change some of the rules and requirements for their cooperation. Later that night, Leary confronted Buckley with a knife, trying to intimidate him. But Buckley remained unfazed and argued that they both had the same goal, even though Leary couldn't see beyond his narrow perspective. The next day, Leary led a group of Irishmen to attack Mr. Mercer's steel mill. They viciously beat the Chinese workers, even causing serious injuries to their hands. Mr. Mercer called the police while seeking refuge in his office. He retrieved his gun, but unfortunately, he suffered a heart attack and collapsed unconscious. At that moment, Ah-Sam arrived and sprang into action, single-handedly defeating all of Leary's men and saving the Chinese workers from further harm. After that, Leary launched a surprise attack on Ah-Sam from behind, knocking him down. They engaged in a fierce and intense fight, with Leary managing to corner Ah-Sam multiple times. However, the unexpected arrival of the police, who had surrounded the area, caught them off guard, forcing them to flee. Later that evening, Bill visited an old friend to collect a debt, as he now worked as a debt collector for Feng Hai. Xing had offered Bill the job to settle his own debt with the gang, and Bill accepted the offer. The following day, Ah-Sam went to see Ah Toy to express his gratitude for her care during his serious injury. He also brought the 2 Irishmen responsible for attacking the Chinese workers at the steel mill and handed them over to Ah Toy for punishment. Ah-Sam then told Ah Toy that he had made a decision to stand up for the Chinese people against oppression and injustice. With that resolve, he chose to rejoin Hop Wei. And so, a new chapter begins in the ongoing struggles and triumphs of Chinatown's inhabitants. The moral we can learn from this series is to never look down on people who are different from us in many ways, because it is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences.